and proud to welcome to the table former Defense Secretary, retired four-star Marine General James Mattis, and former Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Affairs under President Reagan, Bing West. They are co-authors of the new book entitled Call Sign Chaos, Learning to Lead. And we welcome you both to the show.
It's great to have you all here. By the way, Barnacle, if
Mr.
West goes towards Mr. Haas, if you could separate them. They have a history here.
There's a history.
Oh, I know that.
They have a history.
There's a terrible problem with shore leave among some people.
Terrible problem. So.
Thank you both for coming in.
So why don't we just, well, you know, let's just, we'll throw the softball to you first. Why did you write the book?
I was very fortunate, tell you the truth, Joe. I was able to lead 40 sailors and Marines as a second lieutenant, 21 years old, and have NCOs teach me leadership principles. Eventually, I commanded 250,000 U.S. and allied troops across the Middle East. And I learned a lot about leadership, from direct leadership to strategic. And when you get to my color hair, you want to pass on the lessons learned.
Now, you know what's so interesting is, as you're reading your book, the civilian think of the Marines is very buttoned down. You follow orders. But you kept talking time and time again about initiative, ingenuity. You kept talking about actually breaking out of the mold. And one of the most important leadership qualities you could have is not stifling creativity. Explain how that fits in a pretty tough button-down culture.
Well, I would say the Marines are very disciplined, but they're not very regimented. They're some of the most unregimented thinkers I've ever been around. And what the leader's job is to set the ultimate vision. Make certain you say what you want to accomplish. And then when you define it in very, very clear terms, you back off, take your hands off the steering wheel, and let young people that you've trained use their initiative, use their aggressiveness to carry it out. And they will surprise you with their ingenuity. They will grab opportunities that you could not possibly have seen from your remote location. So it's a wonderful way to get ownership for any mission. I don't care if you're in business or on the battlefield or on the football field. You want initiative by your young people. You don't want to stifle it.
Well, Bing, we're not going to get the answer from the general on this one, so I'll say to you, you all wrote down the 3 C's for leadership, and it was competence,
right?
Be really good in the basics, know what the nuclear triad is, understand the part. I mean, we could go down the list.
Sure.
But be good in the basics. Secondly, caring. Teddy Roosevelt, I love the quote. People, they don't care what you know until they know that you care.
Exactly.
Now, that doesn't sound like a lot of leaders we have in Washington, D.C.
Well, then you come to the third one, conviction.
Right.
You have to know what that leader stands for. And the reason I wanted to write this book is because I spent a couple of decades on the battlefields with Jim, and he was always at the front. But the troops knew that he was going to win those battles that he was sent in for, and he was going to do the best he could for them. And they got that. He was going to take care of them, but he was going to get that mission done. Time and time again, I saw him at the front, and I thought, this can make a kind of an interesting book about how he led, even when you had policy chaos. We went through 3 presidents. It wasn't just President Trump. I mean, President Bush and President Obama, all 3 of them took on more than they should have taken on.
Okay, so can we just stop right there and let me open this up to both of y'all, because it's not because, as you say at the end, we live in such a tribalized culture. You talk badly about, if I talk badly about President Trump, my relatives don't talk to me. If I talk badly about Barack Obama, I got other people who don't talk about. If I talk badly about George W. Bush's, I mean, it's just, we're so tribal. Nobody seems to be able to step back. I want to talk about the last 19 years, because in 2000, we were really at the height of our power, probably in our history. We stood alone in 2000. The last 19 years, we had one foreign policy disaster after another, all either overreach after 9/11 or overreaction to the overreach. Let's talk about the past 19 years, because you all are critical, rightly, of the last 3 presidents.
I think, Joe, what you're pointing out, I would agree with as far as the definition of the problem, but for one word, where you said we stood alone. Our alliances were a big part of why we stood astride the world as a model for others to follow. And Bing and I have been on many battlefields. I was privileged to fight many times for this great big experiment we call America. And I would just tell you that I was never on a crowded battlefield. I was never out there without allies. When I went into Afghanistan a couple months after this town was hit,
right,
after some maniacs attacked this town and killed 3,000 innocent people from 91 countries, we were fighting in the Dust Bowl of Afghanistan. And right alongside us, joining us, were troops from Canada and the United Kingdom, Norway,
and by
Germany.
the way, so let me restate that, because obviously it's something we talk about every day, that we're only as strong as our alliances. But the United States was, we were extraordinarily powerful. We had gone from its bipolar world to a world where we were first among equals. That's changed over the past 19 years. And I mean, we can start with what happened in 2002 when they were telling you a war was going to start up in Iraq, and we can talk about what happened after we supposedly won that war, and and we had Bremer do what he did.
Well, I think, well, go ahead, Bing.
Well, I was going to say that it struck me, because after I spent years in Vietnam, that we got into this thing in Afghanistan and Iraq. I thought Richard and Jim and Mike, in kind of a sloppy manner. Jim used to spend days on rehearsals ensuring everyone knew what we were doing and why we were doing it. And it seemed to me that at the top, policy was made willy-nilly by people not taking the time to be able to explain that policy to that corporal who was going to go out on that battlefield and risk his life. That I didn't think the people at the policy level were taking the time to get their message right. Jim?
Well, this is a problem not just with any one administration. I think it's a problem that crosses the Western democracies right now. They have trouble believing that their values are worth defending, and if you actually have to go into a fight, you have to choose how to fight, and you have to determine to win the fight. You can't go in and then say, whoa, this was a mistake, something like that. When you take that grave decision, it's got to be for a sound reason. You have to have a strategic purpose, a policy. And like Bing said, we did not rigorously look at the problem. We did not define the problem sufficiently.
In Iraq.
We didn't define a number of problems. I think it starts in the 1990s when we expand NATO, and I'm not sure that we've really examined the second-order consequences of expanding NATO in the way we did. I'm not against expanding it, but I think if you were to go back to the root cause, take a look at how we teach history on university campuses today. I don't think we're preparing young men and women for leadership, historically informed leadership, because history may not be perfect, but it's the only guide we have. It'll light the path ahead and at least tell you two things. How did people before you deal with something successfully and unsuccessfully? Now you know the right questions to ask when you hit these inflection points that you were referring to.
If you can't read, Mike, you can't lead. That's what General Mattis says.
Yeah, I mean, the history element of this, we've been talking about it for decades, almost a decade now, about the lack of history being taught children in grammar schools, American history, our history, in never mind college, grammar school, high school. But in this theme, before we get to the redundancy of you saying you're not going to speak about Trump, I'd like to ask,
hey, Mike, don't kill Hamlet in the first act. There are a lot of people that can't wait to hear him dish about 10 minutes from now, but go ahead.
Off of the discussion that Joe was having with the two of you, Ambassador Khalilzad is now in the process of coming up with some sort of withdrawal formula for the United States troops remaining in Afghanistan. How concerned are you about an element that people don't understand called force protection? In terms of the troops who are there now, withdrawing those troops, do you agree with what's being done right now?
Well, Mike, I don't know enough about the specifics and the back chatter that's going on, the negotiations, to comment about that. Force protection, the military will take care of force protection. It'll be as good as they can make it under the circumstances they're dealt. But I think, too, in this town in 1984, Secretary of State George Shultz gave a talk about terrorism, and that's what's got to inform us today. And he said, terrorism is going to be with us. It's going to cost us innocent people and our troops' lives. It's an ambient threat today. 17 years after George Shultz said that, 9/11 happens right here in this town. Now, we can want a war over, we can declare the war over, but the enemy gets a vote. And the bottom line is, any negotiation like this has got to accommodate and take into account the enemy's vote. What is the enemy going to do? That's just the reality we live in. I'd like to bring a more positive message to you and say, well, you know, it's all going to be over and we're going to live happily ever after. And we saw what happened when the intelligence community warned President Obama that if you pull all the troops out of Iraq, you will have to go back in for our interest. And that's exactly what happened. So that's the concern I have. Again, we're not even being informed by recent history in some of what we're doing, but I can't comment on the specifics of this one. I don't want to pretend to know details that I don't.
General, one of the stories today, but it's not a new story, is the use of military construction funds being transferred and being used along the southern border where U.S. forces are being detailed and being deployed. It happened when you were in the Pentagon. It's happening again now. How can we justify the transfer of American troops to the southern border, given all the things we're coping with in the Middle East, out in Asia, in Europe? How can we make an argument that that's a legitimate use of American military forces, given all the demands on these forces around the world?
You know, when I was a colonel commanding a regiment in the 1990s, one of my tasks was to deploy battalions of infantry, this was of course under President Clinton, to the southwest border to help set up listening posts, outposts, in order to warn the Border Patrol where people were coming across. I think we've forgotten that. Under President Bush, we deployed troops to the border. President Obama had troops on the border, armed troops on the border as well, for 7 of 8 years. So it's how we are doing it today, where we're increasingly in an adversarial relationship between the executive branch and the legislative. And I think we have to look at it in this way. I think it was Einstein who said, you know, if given an hour to save the world, how would he compose his thoughts? He said, I'd spend 55 minutes defining the problem, and I'd save the world in 5 minutes. I think our executive branch and legislative have to sit down and define the problem to mutual satisfaction. Otherwise, every solution either one proposes, the other one's going to say that doesn't address the problem as I see it. We're not defining the problem sufficiently to come up with a collaborative stance out of Washington, D.C. between the Congress and the executive branch.
Reminds me of an Albanian friend of mine says, measure 9 times.
Yeah.
Hammer once, or saw once, and I do it just backwards. That's a problem. Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.